So some of the things that you need to be considering before you talk about expanding, before you start pulling the trigger to actually make this happen is, can I legally sell my products internationally? Do I have any distribution rights that I may have granted a distributor that now I can't sell into that country? Or are there restrictions? Like, for example, if you're selling two-way radios, those frequencies that they use may be something that are illegal to use in other countries. If you're selling supplements, you may need to rebrand the labels because you need it to be in local language. Maybe there's different disclosures that need to happen. Those are things that are important, and I would lean on your legal teams or do some research to find out, or talk to us. We can help you to determine, is there anything that's holding us back? The most common thing we see are labeling challenges with any type of ingestible type of products, but there are other considerations for sure. What product assortment should you sell internationally? My personal take is I like to see a broad approach where you're throwing up your entire US assortment in the marketplace and see what consumers gravitate to, and then ramp up accordingly. So you can do a wide but narrow, or a wide but not deep approach, to start, and then deepen on the SKUs that show, good performance. And that's really how Amazon would do it. So if Amazon were to, place a purchase order as a 1P vendor for a lot of their brands, they're going to let data decide what the consumers are going to want. They'll test a bunch of different products, and then based on the resale rates or the sell-through rates, they will then buy the items that are obviously in demand, and the items that aren't in demand may fall by the wayside. Why mess with a good thing? If Amazon's figured out that works really well for them, why should a third-party seller try and do something significantly different? Too often I find that people are like, I'm going to only send in my top 10%, my top 10 items or something like that. That to me is short-sighted, because the top 10 items on Amazon US may not be your top 10 items in another market, and you might be giving up substantial market share. I remember in one of the past large retailers that I worked at, our online assortment, if I compared our online assortment versus our offline assortment, the top 10 items had zero overlap. They were all different because the consumer online gravitated to the more expensive items, the harder to find items, etc. Well, you may find that in the US market, you're selling certain products because it's not as competitive on that price point or that product, or there's just a different need in the US market. But online in an international market, it might be that people gravitate to a different price point entirely, or they have a different product need altogether. So why try and narrow that on your own? That's my personal perspective. How will you get the inventory into the countries? You're probably going to need to partner with a 3PL, someone that can also handle returns ideally, so you don't have to have returns sent back internationally. How are you going to handle VAT? You've got to register for VAT, and you've got to make sure you're remitting VAT taxes. How will you handle translations? Amazon's going to oftentimes provide translations, but how are you going to make sure that all your products are properly translated, not just using a Google Translate, but really done well? And how does my pricing differ? Amazon can set it up so that your pricing is going to be essentially the same, but converted for currency differences across all marketplaces. But is that the right fit for you? It may not be, especially if your costs differ a lot. Now you've got additional costs that may be incurred. For example, currency conversions. When Amazon's paying you, if they're paying you into a US account, there's a 3% fee, I believe, to do the currency conversion. And there's third parties that can probably cut that in half, but it's still added costs that you don't have in the US. The international shipping, to Amazon FBA may be higher. You may find that initially you get higher returns because you haven't figured out how to, your product's not clear to the customer because you don't have instruction booklet in all the different languages for the countries you're selling. These are costs that you need to consider that may differ on retail price. So think about these things in advance. And this is just a small subset of the considerations you may have. But I want to open up to the team now and talk about Yeah, any additional commentary on the bullet points that we just talked about, or anything else that people should be thinking about?
Yep. Just a quick thing, Steve, when you mentioned translations there, don't make the assumption that, because you speak English and that you have your products on Amazon.com in the US in English, that when you go to the UK, that you should not worry about translation. Often words are quite a bit different, have different meanings. Cookie, the trunk of your car, the boot, a truck, a lorry, things along those lines. But the additional part to that is the keywords in there. What may be an important keyword for us in the US and the way we describe something may be different in the US, in the UK, but even in the other countries that are non-English. It might be Spanish, but you may not want to translate the exact same keyword into it for something in Spain. So make sure you're doing your homework along those lines beyond just the straight translation from English to whatever the native language is.
Yeah, we often talk about, what separates a good seller from an advanced seller, and it's all the details, right? It's the fine tuning. Well, when you sell internationally, there's going to be a fair amount of fine tuning like that you're going to want to put in that will matter, and it makes a difference, like the back end keywords and changing the front end content to use local language specific terminology. It's going to make a world of difference in some cases.
Yep.
Amjed, did you have anything to add?
No, it's a very good point that Robert brought up. For example, I had a seller that I worked with a couple of months ago where the keywords that they put in for advertising were the English keyword, like, for example, glass cleaner, and it was like actually glass cleaner, but no one's looking up glass cleaner in Italy, right? They're looking up whatever that means in Italian, right? So just making sure you translate those properly, and you also pay attention to the, little words like, pants, trousers, those just little details, like you mentioned, separates the good from the great.
Yeah, makes a big difference. Yeah. Before we transition, we did have a question from someone that hits this slide here that, however, it is for Canada versus, the European marketplace. But basically the question is remote fulfillment is remote fulfillment a viable strategy to build a business in the Canadian marketplace? Right now they're slowly working their way into it. And their biggest hurdle right now is bilingual packaging. Is the most significant hurdle at the moment. So while we talk about, bilingual, for example, Spain or Italy, Germany, that kind of thing, would you be comfortable addressing at least that question for Canada, and or is that a different marketplace that has different rules and that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's I'm strictly Europe. Unfortunately, I don't have any expertise on Canada or anything like that.
Okay, no worries. I can tell you, Nick, that I do have a customer that did move into Canada and did have to do some bilingual packaging. So contact Steve at Prime Guidance, and we can definitely talk about that and help you with that.
Yeah, it depends on. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Paul. I'll just add.
I was just going to say it depends on the category, because I know, at least my experience working with supplements, for example, in Canada, if you go down the path of, okay, I want to set up in Canada, you get there's an option of, all right, well, I'm just going to keep the product in the FBA US, and, I'm going to fulfill from the US. Well, you actually can't do that with supplements. So
right.
He's referring to the NARF program.
Right.
What's
exactly.
that?
You're referring to the NARF program, North American
Well,
Retail
actually, in this
Fulfillment.
case, I wasn't, because the client didn't want to go into Mexico, but same concept. Yeah.
Well, NARF can support you for Canada or Mexico. And just for those that you don't know what that is, it basically allows you to keep your product in the US marketplace, list your products in Canada or Mexico. Amazon would then do the cross-border transportation from a US distribution center into the the either Canada or Mexico. And it would show Prime eligible, but it would show a longer lead time to get the customer, into the to the customer. And that's what you're referring to.
Yeah, exactly. That was my point. Is yes, you can fulfill remotely, depending on the category. The other thing is, related to that, with the supplements, and it's not only, it's not only a question of, oh, okay, well, actually, I can't fulfill remotely. The other thing is, to sell supplements in Canada, you are actually required to be approved by the federal government in Canada. So there's a whole separate process there of getting approved as a registry to be able to sell supplements in Canada. So, it's not always, sort of just the setup and the conversion of the listings, but there are, again, as we've been talking about, a number of country-specific considerations. I don't claim to be an expert on Canada. A while back, I did sell into Canada, having nothing to do with Amazon, and you were required to have French in Montreal. My understanding is that is not the case now, but again, I would suggest, somebody do their due diligence and make sure.
And there's some strategic ways around that. I mean, you don't have to keep your price the same when you're having to put up. I mean, that's an added cost. You can, as you have your manufacturer put that new label on or have that label created, that kind of thing, you can do a different SKU and you can set it up that way. But, and you were referring to anything that goes on your skin or in your body, you're going to have to get, the Canadian version of the FDA approval. So there's time to register, that kind of thing. But if it's not like that, then it's a little bit easier.
If you're doing remote fulfillment yourself, you may find that the NARF program actually works better for you, because anything in FBA essentially can be eligible, assuming there's no constraints. Ideally, what we would always recommend is utilizing like NARF, which is going to allow Amazon to show your products in those countries. And then as soon as there's proof of concept that it's going to work for you, and you understand the market a little bit better, then actually proceed with shipping products to Amazon Canada and put it in their fulfillment centers, so you can get the product to the customers even faster. And that's when you'll generally see your marketplace in Canada accelerate. Now, that being said, Canada is a small percentage of the Amazon US business. I would say most of our clients probably see 3 to 5% of the US business occur in Canada. We have some anomalies where Canada is a much bigger piece of the business, and that may be the case for you, but don't necessarily bank on it producing tons of revenue. So that needs to be a consideration when you're thinking about how much am I going to invest to sell into that market. And we'll talk on a future slide here about the countries that we would recommend generally prioritizing.
And let me ask you really quick as a segue back into Europe again. But if you're looking at Canada and looking at Europe, and we talked about image and video content earlier, when you talk about labeling, let's say you have a tag that hangs off of apparel or something like that, and you're thinking about translating that into French, that kind of thing. Would you go ahead and spend that time then at that moment to go ahead and do the other languages and plan for UK and Europe? What are y'all's suggestions about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. It's I have a seller that did a QR code and was able to get it approved in multiple marketplaces because different languages are on a QR code. And it was just like and I'm like, oh, wow, that's incredibly smart. But yeah, definitely. We usually we have a compliance company that we refer clients out to for all of this kind of stuff, where they consult with you for free to get you a plan. But yeah, definitely change the labeling. Just do it all at once if you do have plans to expand everywhere eventually.
And there's some services that can actually provide like an intermediary shipping point where they can relabel for you and then ship it into the local FBA markets, almost like a value-added service that they can offer. So there's a lot of ways around any challenge that you're facing. We can help you through it, just like Amjed is helping us on the European markets. We've got contacts that help clients sell into other markets and can get you into the NARF program or other support you in other markets.
I love that
I'm
QR code, Amjed. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I was actually about to compliment you on that, but really to say, this is why Prime Guidance does these kind of webinars.
Exactly.
Exactly.
So we can take our clients, and we have the expertise already, but now we move them up a level by having, you know, guests like you on here that can give these little tiny things that can have such huge differences.
Huge value.
Code, choose your language, and now there you've resolved things. And it could be for anything. It could be care instructions. It could be, you know, how to work with Amazon if you have an issue, whatever, you know.
Robert, think about all the new apparel attributes that got added just in the last year, and being able to, you know, there's so many people were having to adjust things because of that, try to help out the Amazon customer and make it a better experience. Doing a QR code, change your website.